Greetings, mortals, and welcome back.
We starting early today. We're starting like 5 minutes early. Is Meteor Mash the name? Like an actual name of an attack? Is that like a signature move of Metagross or something? That probably checks out. So we've already patched. Now we need to share the link. And once we do that, we'll be good to go. Good to go. That's not the correct channel. Let's see. There we go. There we go. So, clicking this. So last we left off, we were in Paradise Valley. We had cleared out a decent portion of it, and we're getting so close to cleaning out the town. And once we've cleared out the town, we'll be able to do things. Okay, apparently we're fighting these first. That's allegedly what's happening. Nope, I wasn't paying attention. Nope. Nope, not again. Once was enough for me, thanks. Nope. I saw that attack animation. Cassowary with the 1400 crit. Okay, so. Did they say 1400? 14,000. You know, slightly more. It's just one order of magnitude, not really a huge deal. Okay, that was weird. Whoa! Thought I was behind that. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. What questions were we going to ask? Are we sure the projectiles here are homing at the appropriate angle they're supposed to home? And the thing that I've been meaning to ask about for several streams, leech. There we go. And why are these bosses so weak? Well, these venomous bosses are just, like, it's weird, because they're, like, attached to, like, a tier 1 unit for some reason. Like, they're not actually spawning correctly. It's not even a funny joke. But I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna keep doing it. Okay, so I don't think I'm crazy. I think that the homing isn't working correctly here. I know that they're homing a bit, but I think that they're homing less. No, we haven't picked up Master Dark. We're actually going to pick up Grandmaster immediately once we get over there. But the house we need is over here. We're going to clear out all of the Titans in between us and there. Like, that should have hit. Right, that was definitely homing less, like it had a less steep homing angle. You could see how it had just barely twisted, right? Yeah, that is the primary reason that we are in Paradise Valley, is to pick up Grandmaster Dark. That's our primary reason to be here. I think that that's going to be an important thing. I'm actually going to save under caster nonsense as well. I'm a little concerned that I'm going to do something dumb. So we're making a backup save, just in case. That's disintegrated. We haven't seen that in a while. It's nice to get a disintegration going again. We weren't even in a map. Oh, speaking of maps, we picked up a map yesterday, right? Let's take a look at the map not tomorrow. let's wait until tomorrow to stream to the map. No, we're gonna look at the map once we are looking at the loot that we found. I think that's how I want to handle it. Okay, let's swap to inventory 5. Inventory 5. I think inventory 5 is going to be pretty consistently empty, and that counts as empty because what the fuck just happened? What just happened? How did I fall into the sky? I have 5 characters sitting here. I'm still flying. My fingers definitely did not hit end. That's not him, that's home. I don't think I hit home. I would be very surprised. Uh-oh, maybe my keyboard is... Maybe my keyboard's having trouble and pressing the buttons on either side of home. Because the thing is that I misclick all the time, but I know when I've misclicked. I have the muscle memory to know when I've misclicked. So it would not be that crazy for me to hit that button. Except that's not a misclick that I think I've ever done. And I do this game so much. Oh, shit. Wasn't paying enough attention, and there's a Titan over there. Whoopsies. I wonder if the game just got confused about whether I had flight permissions or not for a second. And the most likely scenario is that I misclicked without noticing it. The only reason that I suspect anything else is that I've never done that before. With this particular type of misclick. But at the same time, I also don't do this kind of flying around as much anymore. Because I'm not usually using like ranged attacks. So like the way that you fly when you're kiting versus the way that you fly when you're fighting in melee they're just different, right? Oh, okay. Well, just standing still and waiting for them to kill me is probably not the best plan. Probably there are better strategies than doing that. Did it again. I wasn't expecting to go to the back to aggro. Okay, how are we going to handle you? The issue is that I can't tag you with a bunch of shots, and I'm so impatient. I'm just so impatient. How can I win if I'm so impatient? It's like my greatest weakness. Okay, we got it. So I am using Meteor Shower rather than using normal projectiles, mostly because I think it's very fun to use Meteor Shower. It's like it's such a fun and unique ability, and I never get to use it. So we have to take advantage of the fact that we're spellcasters on this run, so that we can actually like use the Meteor Shower. It's gonna be weird going back to a melee. Like, it's gonna be so strange to be like, oh yes, I am once again bound by whether I can actually get in ranged hits with me. I just dodged in real life. Okay, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. Death Blossom isn't as interesting anymore. It was bad before, right? Like before it was bad, and now it's less interesting and probably much better, right? that's my impression. Because Death Blossom is going to target an enemy and shoot a bunch of projectiles into him, right? How much did that hit for? I didn't actually see how much I hit for. It looked like to me that it said 600, which does not impress me. I don't think it was 600. It could have been. Okay, it hit for 440 per hit. Okay. Well, I deserved that for trying to use this.
I've never seen one before.
Yeah, it's very, very different now. Basically, I believe... Yeah, I'm sure that, like, a lot of viewers didn't even notice that I've been using Death Blossom this whole time. When I'm on an AoE rotation, anytime you see a Rock Blast that sounds like that, anytime you hear that sound effect, that's a Death Blossom going out. It's the only spell that has that sound effect. So, if you've been wondering why sometimes the sound effect is different for Rock Blast, it's because it's not Rock Blast, it's Death Blossom. Yeah, it's the primary means by which... I mean, the projectile also does look different. The projectile looks different as well, but it does basically the same thing. And I haven't used it enough. I haven't noticed when I use the Death Blossom, I haven't noticed it having the same, like, oh, I'm dead now effect that happens whenever I hit an Ice Blast. Anytime I use Ice Blast, I feel like, oh, okay, I died. I'm gonna lose this because only one target is going to get hit stunned, and I didn't do any damage, and I blew through an enormous amount of mana to do it. So let me take a look, actually. So this costs 78. Ice Blast costs 130. I actually can't. Death Blossom doesn't work without a target. Okay. Maybe it only doesn't work without a target indoors. That's interesting. So, the weird thing is that Death Blossom, that's what I expect to see from a Death Blossom. That's the behavior I expect. If you use Death Blossom indoors without a target, it does... It makes the noise. As if you're trying to cast an implosion. Interesting. So it's supposed to not work... Oh, so this is actually a bug that we can report, is that the Death Blossom behavior is, like, inconsistent. Where it's like, it should probably be either castable indoors or not castable indoors. Like, that should be a choice, right? Make it one of the two. Rather than being like, okay, you can cast it indoors if you have a target. Especially because for Elementalists, since they're going to swap around to the different things, the thinger. Gotcha. Which is kind of funny because I feel like outdoors, Death Blossom is kind of garbage because it doesn't, like, target. Like, it's like good luck hitting anything with it. But indoors, I feel like it would actually be really useful. Like, there's a lot of rooms where I feel like you could probably get some good value out of a Death Blossom. Not, like, great value, but considering, like, the trajectory, I feel like there's certain places where, like, you could shoot up a stairwell and then hit enemies that are in the room at the top of the stairwell if you targeted it correctly, in a way that would be really valuable for, like, a shotgun-type spell. Though Death Blossom has enough projectiles on it that I would almost consider it a pseudo AoE. Like, I'm generally... Yeah, that has a lot of projectiles on it. That to me, that's a pseudo AoE. It can't hit all those projectiles on the same target. I would consider that a pseudo AoE. 100%. Like, there's a point where Cleave becomes similar to AoE, and I would say that meets the threshold. That right there is something that meets the threshold for a pseudo AoE. Wow, that was embarrassing. I'm just like looking at the projectile, going, "This will be fine." Let's see. And it was. That's the thing, is that it actually was fine, and that's pretty funny. Okay, the Hydras have taken basically no damage. Looks like the Venomous Hydras take the most damage from that kind of business, because the Colossals have a lot more HP, and the baseline ones are immune to fire. So Meteor Swarm doesn't do a lot of damage to them. In case you've been wondering why the normal Hydras are surviving roughly as long as the Colossals, that's why. Like, when we're finishing up the dregs of the group, it's like a Hydra and a Colossal Hydra. That's what. Obviously, in the case where we're actually, hitting the enemies according to something more than just the splash pattern of how they move. Wow, look at the damage we got on some of those. Heck yeah. Okay. Okay. But I actually think, if we think of Rock Blast being the Meteor Swarm equivalent for Earth, I actually feel like allowing it to be used indoors makes thematic sense, since it's literally Rock Blast. Like, it's literally a Rock Blast, so that makes a lot of sense. But also, making it so that... Sorry, it's not a Rock Blast, it's a whatever it's called. Rock Blast is a different thing. Death Blossom. But it's literally like a rock spell, so it makes sense for it to be usable underground. But in addition to that, from a balance perspective, the fact that it's kind of like a worse version of Meteor Swarm that's usable indoors, I think is actually... I think that's a valid and valuable niche that would be cool to fill. So... I'd be proud of you for watching a Claire Obscure trailer. It's good. It's a good game. I have nothing but recommendations for it, and confusion at the response that people have to it. Those two things. But the I think that would make Death Blossom. I think that would make it solid, because Death Blossom traditionally is a very cool spell that doesn't have much use, right? Like, it just doesn't get much usage. It'd be kind of fun, actually, if they made it like a really expensive spell to cast, but made each individual shot home on the nearest target. So it'll either do like a little bit of like cleave damage, or it'll do an insane amount of damage to a single target, as long as you can launch the projectile at a place where the things have time to home in on them. That would be really cool as a niche. The question is whether it would be completely out of control or not. I don't actually know if that would make the spell too insane. Like in single target scenarios, especially like if you're thinking of like dragon slaying situations, if all of those were homing in, it might be just like really crazy. But I mean, look, who cares? I don't care, actually. Something being a little crazy for killing dragons. Dragons aren't that hard to kill. Get over it. If there's a dragon in the zone, you can fly. The big question is how you fix Ice Blast. I feel bad for Ice Blast. Ice Blast needs fixing. This is the Master and Grandmaster of Dark. We are GM Dark now. So, with that being the case, we can now learn Dragon Breath. We can also learn Soul Drinker. Eventually. But we don't have the spell yet, so... We can't learn Soul Drinker at this exact moment, but we'll eventually be able to learn it. So Dragon Breath currently costs... 295 to cast. It does about... Let's see if we triple that. It does roughly triple the damage, minus 376. But also costs a little more than 3 times as much. So at the moment, it's not going to be the most cost-effective for single target. Oh man, that's really unfortunate that I missed that. Shadow Supreme Titan. For a second, I read that as Supreme Titan, and I was very confused.
Okay.
Okay. I know that there is an affix type that people have been excited for me to see, that I have not run into yet. People keep mentioning it around me, and it's going to be interesting to see when we finally run into one. The affix is omnipotent, I think? Or something like that? Like, I have an idea of what it does, based off of the title. Well, I actually have several ideas for what it could do, but I have one thing in mind that is what I think it does. But I don't have confirmation on that. I'll get confirmation on that when we actually run into one. Okay.
I don't know.
This is exciting. We finally... I cannot believe I dodged that. I cannot believe... I was going up and not... I didn't turn, like, at all. I can't believe that was a projectile that I dodged. There's no way that the tracking is consistently as good here as it is in the rest of this game. I haven't played the 6th version in so long. I'm not comparing it to the 6th version. Also, the 6th version, you basically can't dodge projectiles. You can only outrange them. So I know... I know I'm not just getting confused by the Might and Magic 6 projectiles. I'm not crazy. It turns out that that's only on the the Redux version. The what is it? I don't remember what that version's called. The one that's on, like, the Unreal Engine or something. Rough. Okay, I also haven't really gotten a good look at, how much damage I'm doing. Oh shit! Ooh, boy. Okay, we got away with it. Alright. So this Shadow Supreme Titan is already pretty wounded. But yeah, I think there's probably also other ones that I haven't seen yet. There might not be. Shadow's a new one that I think we only saw recently. Like, we only saw that within the last couple of runs. It's kind of cool that, like, there just keep being new ones added. And because of how slowly I progress, there is a... Wow, you take a long time to regen. Why is your mana regenning so slow? This doesn't feel right. Everybody else is at full. Because, like, we're out of combat and out of Thinger. Maybe they had cast this spell more recently than everyone else, because it seems to be going faster now. I'm probably just misremembering how quickly mana bars go up. Or I'm not accounting for the fact that the last time that I was able to consistently get into the green to regen my mana, I had much smaller mana pools. So, like, my relative regen is much slower. Because I'm regenning like 40 per second out of combat, which is... that's a lot. That's not a small amount of regen. Alright. Okay, still pretty healthy. This noble is pretty low and pretty exposed, so I think we'll go for that one next. Wunderbar. Get that dealt with. Unfortunately, we did aggro the Hydras there, which I would prefer not to, because it separates them out from each other a little bit. So, yeah, Meteor Swarm hit for a decent amount of damage. It hit for like 4k total. Not bad. I think we get more meteors at GM, right? I think it's like 16 and then 24 or something, maybe? I could be wrong. And it doesn't matter that we don't have Starburst that much, actually. Just because... wow. Okay, that's super awesome. I love that for me. Oh, this is the boss. I'm probably not running you out of HP here. Let's get out of here, because we're getting kind of close to those things.
I don't know it.
Still pretty healthy. That's still a pretty decent amount of health that it has there. We're not that close to killing it. Let's get out.
Beats me.
This is not as low as I expected, actually. Okay. I think we're probably... because we're going to be doing mostly single target damage... what the hell just happened? There actually might be a problem with my keyboard. The end key just got pressed randomly. There's no way I hit that one. Huh. There's no shot that I hit that one. You saw my my thinger do that? I didn't hit the one. I don't think there's any shot that I hit that. Oh boy, we might need a new keyboard at some point. We've only had like a couple of misfires like that, but like that can escalate into a catastrophic failure pretty fast. That's not a good sign. I should buy some backup keyboards. Which I know is a thing that streamers do. Not all streamers, but I know at least one streamer, maybe, I think multiple, have pulled out one of their backup keyboards that they just have on hand, because keyboards are cheap, right? And like if you're doing this professionally, right, it makes sense to just have an extra on hand. I wouldn't say that I'm doing this professionally, but I certainly do it semi-professionally. Okay. Well, that's good. The distinction on doing it professionally to me is less important. I think that, like, hobbyism, right, is something that, like, is in many cases more serious than professionalism. Like, doing something as a hobby, people often take their hobbies more seriously than their profession, because their profession is something that they're just doing for money, whereas their hobby is something they're doing because they have a passion for it. So, like, if you think about, like a person who works, like, full-time at, you know, whatever job they have, but also does, like, I'm trying to remember what there was some sort of markets that, like, when I was, like, a baby, like, really little kid, that my mom would sell stuff at, right? And I don't even remember what she was selling at those. But it wasn't, like, a professional thing, but it was something she was doing and making money doing because she enjoyed doing it. She's also always taken her actual professions very seriously, to be clear. I'm not saying she took that more seriously than she took her profession, because unlike many people, I don't think that that's the case. She's always been very, very... she's always been very devoted to doing things correctly. But anyway, point being that, like, I would definitely consider it, I have a responsibility to the stream and to the viewers and things like that is similar to, like, the kind of responsibility that a person who's a professional has. Like, I don't think there's a really major distinction there. The professional aspect I associate more with whether someone can actually sustain their lifestyle off of it, which I don't. That is not the case, right? Like, this is not a thing that sustains my lifestyle. I'm a professional housewife. That my profession is housewife, and I'm not good at it, but I try. I'm not great at it, but I try. Anyway, so that's the distinction there, is, like, because, like, some elements of professionalism don't apply, and some do. So, like, when we're talking about, like, financial stuff, like, okay, like, how expensive is your stream setup and things like that, those kinds of things are like business decisions that make a lot of sense as a professional who's making their living doing a thing to use to make sure that they have, like, specific types of hardware, to make sure that there's, like, this, that, or the other thing. Whereas with someone who's doing it as a hobby, right? Yes, I would say as a hobbyist, someone who's doing it in a capacity where it's not paying the bills for them, there isn't a reasonable expectation of that person that they're in addition going to take on all the financial burdens that you would associate with an actual professional who's paying their bills with it, right? So there's a distinction when it comes to financial stuff. I don't think that it really applies as much with regards to like the non-financial stuff, right? Like when it comes to like, okay, actually being around for stream timings and things like that, those are things that I think you have the responsibility to do in pretty equal capacity, whether you're paying the bills doing it or not. I don't think that it makes that big a difference there. Which, indicates just how bad I am at that, because I do think that that's a serious thing. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting. There's not like a great... I don't think there is a great word for a hobby that involves a responsibility to other people. That we have like in the lexicon. Like I think that there's an interesting like space of like, because a hobby is usually a very it usually implies like that it's a thing that you're doing just for yourself, right? Like a hobbyist is fundamentally not usually doing something that is like for other people. That's just not usually the association that you have with a hobby. Though, I guess it kind of depends, because, like, obviously a person who does D&D as a hobby has a very strong responsibility to the other people in their D&D group. Like, there's a very strong social responsibility to, be on time, do the things, like, meet the expectations of that kind of a social group, right? Any kind of social group that involves that kind of stuff. I'm actually going to swap back to Toxic Cloud just because it's costing too much MP for a single target to be worth it. I do think that in any situation where we're going to consistently hit at least 2 targets, we're going to get way more value out of Dragon Breath. So Dragon Breath is probably in dungeons going to be fully replacing Toxic Cloud. So this is a boss. You know what the problem is? I just realized the problem with Mind Magic. They took away telekinesis. Telekinesis got moved off of Mind Magic. It used to be a Mind Magic spell in Mind Magic 6. And then it got removed and put in... Because, like, Mind Magic is a really bad school. Like, it's a real bad spell school in Mind Magic 8. It, like... What do you need in Mind Magic other than Cure Insanity, right? Like, the spell school is... Like, Berserk is very powerful on its own in very specific contexts, so it has one very, like, niche utility spell that's very good. But everything else is kind of garbage, right? Like, Enslave, I guess, is, I need to be very careful with my language. Enslave is good as a spell. It's a good, strong utility spell. But the spell school as a whole is like you have Enslave, and then you have a bunch of spells that are like Enslave but worse, like multiple of them. And then you have a bunch of single target crowd control, and then you have one AoE crowd control that hypothetically could be very valuable. Generally doesn't have that much, going for it, but is like in theory useful in a lot of cases.
Ready.
But like, if I recall correctly, it doesn't really have mine doesn't have any major buffs associated with it. Again, I'm talking about like vanilla. I'm not talking about the way that Ma has redone things, because Ma has dramatically improved the self schools. They're much better now. Because I think like meditation is in mind, and meditation gives MP regen, right?
I've never seen.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should have a word for it, because semi-professional I don't think is appropriate. I don't think that semi-professional is a good word to describe a hobby where you have maybe you make some money. You certainly don't make your primary money on it, but is fundamentally like a thing that entails a responsibility to a bunch of people, particularly strangers or semi-strangers, right? Like, with streaming, you have a bunch of people that you know, right? Like, you know the people in chat, but you only know some of the people in chat. You don't really know everybody. And a lot of people that you're, creating for will never talk to you. They're never going to communicate with you at all, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a very strong sort of like responsibility to them, because you don't know them, but they know you, and their knowing of you is what gives you a responsibility for someone, not you knowing them, right? I don't have a strong responsibility to Markiplier, because I know him, he doesn't know me. I have no responsibility as an individual to him, right? My behaviors... Wait, that's the wrong... Are you casting... Do we have 2 copies of Fly now? Probably not, we're fine. Okay. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about parasociality, like parasocial relationships in general, is that there is a direct inverse in terms of like who has responsibility to who, and who is emotionally invested in a way that I don't think is necessarily always true in other scenarios, right? Like, if I am just sitting here living my life as a private individual, puttering around, and like someone that I know kind of vaguely, like someone I barely know, develops a crush on me, they get a very strong parasocial relationship off of that, right? My behavior impacts them much more strongly than you'd expect, right? That doesn't really give me a strong responsibility to them, because I didn't really consent to them. I didn't willingly
Never seen one before.
engage in behavior that is meant to generate that effect, right? I'm just here doing my thing, right? So like, but if I'm streaming, I'm deliberately and specifically cultivating a situation where I have a less strong personal investment in the people that are watching me than they have in me, which means that I do have a specific and direct responsibility for the consequences of that relationship in a way that someone who has a crush on you, like, you obviously have all the same responsibilities toward them that you have toward everyone else, but I don't think that you have, like, a specific obligation to them beyond that, especially if you don't know, right? So, anyway, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. I find the dynamics of parasociality to be incredibly intriguing. Like, it's just a very interesting topic for study, I think. In particular, like, the parallels between... Because parasociality is not a new thing. Parasociality is a thing that has always existed, but we haven't had a strong reason to talk about it in the past. Because it's like as a general case, right? Parasociality is something that exists within, like, again, like a situation where somebody has a crush on you and you barely know who they are, right? Like, that's a very parasocial relationship. There's a huge, like, difference between the emotional investment of one party versus the other party. But, like, I don't feel like that was the thing that really people were paying that close of attention to before. And now that we have, like, live streamers, and to a degree, like, normal celebrities have parasocial elements to them as well. But it's a different thing, I think, with celebrities. Because, well, it depends. I would say a musician has very standard parasociality going on with them. The problem with actors and the parasociality with actors is complicated by the fact that people are really dumb. And people do not understand that actors are not their characters. And I do mean that quite literally. Like, the amount of hate that an actor will get because their character in a show that they did not write did a thing, and the person is completely incapable of separating reality from fiction, makes it so that... And I think this is, to a degree, why parasociality has such, like, that has, like, the connotation that it does in society of being very, like, unreasonable and crazy, when it's, like, it's just the most normal thing on Earth, right? Like, I would say that probably the majority of people in the world have an experience from their childhood where they or someone, either they had a crush on someone who maybe knew their name, right? But, like, did not, like... But that they did not have any direct engagement with, and who, like, is fundamentally a stranger, right? You have a crush on a stranger. That's a thing that's pretty much everyone either had that crush themselves or someone else had that crush on them, right? And I think for most people, it's probably both, right? Maybe not for most people. Maybe I'm projecting a bit, right? But, like, from my perspective, it seems very normal. Like, the people that, like, people had crushes on when I was in high school were not generally people that were in their own social groups. It was people who were in other social groups that they didn't really interact with. That's the general... That's the general perspective that I have for that. Which I guess makes sense, because a crush is kind of, like, intrinsically parasocial. And so, like, if two friends start dating, generally speaking, a lot of people would not there isn't a point during that where people are necessarily going to even say that anybody has a crush on anybody else. They just started dating because obviously they really like each other. It's like, okay, well, these two at some point, you know, started making eyes at each other, and then shock and awe, they started dating. Okay, like nobody in the social group necessarily. Sometimes there is. Usually, if someone's bringing out crush, when people who are, you know, closely tied socially are involved, it is not, at least initially, like a reciprocal thing. Anyway, it's a little thing. Yeah, so people can understand, like, the standard stuff with that, I think, fairly easily. But maybe they can't. It's possible that, like, when I make the direct, like, correlation between, like, someone having a crush on someone else and someone having a parasocial relationship with a streamer, they think I mean that, like, people actually have a crush on streamers, which is that's not what I'm talking about. People do end up with crushes on streamers, but I'm just talking about, like, the difference between the emotional investment, right? Where, like, when you have a crush on someone, you have this massive emotional investment that is completely unjustified by your actual relationship to them, right? It's like the you know, parasociality that by which all other parasociality could be defined. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to get. I was going to say, you know what? Actually, maybe religious fervor is the ultimate parasociality, but I don't actually believe that, because I don't think people really humanize their deities in a meaningful sense. Some people do. Like, some people clearly have a parasocial relationship with their deity that's, like, meaningfully like a parasocial relationship. But most people, I don't think, are... I don't think that most people are meaningfully humanizing their deity sufficiently to have it be the same category of thing. So I don't actually believe that. Also, crushes are stronger anyway. Like, they make a stronger, like, exemplar of parasociality conceptually. Like, the in-theory relationship between a worshiper and their deity is definitionally very parasocial. Like, there's a... But, like, just because the thing says that it is something doesn't mean that it actually is. And I don't think that most people who worship a deity think that that deity is a person. I just they don't think of them that way. They might believe that on some level, but the way that they internalize their thoughts and actions toward that deity are not like the way that they would interact with a person. Like, if people actually behaved the way that, like, just thinking about, like, you know, because, like, people think that, like, their deity is watching them at all times, and, like, if I actually believed that somebody was watching me at all times and had internalized that belief in a meaningful way, you just get different behavior, right? Like, you'll talk to your deity just casually at that point, right? Like, you know, oh, you know, like, you basically, like, you would involve them in the conversation in the way that, like, if you have, like, a friend group that you're hanging out with, and then you also have, like, a friend on the phone at the same time, the way that you'll include them in conversations, I feel like people who really would be, like, humanizing their deity to the point where parasociality applies would engage in similar behaviors. And I think some people do, but I think it's extremely rare and it's generally frowned upon. I don't think most people want to think too deeply on the idea that their deity is looking at them at all times. That's. I think that most people would prefer to ignore that part of the canon whenever they're, just chilling. There we go. Anyway, that being the case, I don't think it's super related. But I think that's also part of why, stringing someone along is so, universally, loathed, right? Like, actively encouraging someone to have romantic feelings for you when you do not share those feelings is a classically sleazy behavior, right? That's classic sleaze behavior. Even if you're not abusing that for anything in particular, even if you're just kind of enjoying the fact that someone has a crush on you, if you're actually leaning into it, where you're you're encouraging it when you don't intend to ever reciprocate, that is widely considered very sleazy. And I think the reason for that is the fact that on some level people recognize that if you cultivate a parasocial relationship, you have a strong responsibility to the person that you are cultivating that in. So I think that it is well in the zeitgeist. It's understood already that, as an example, a streamer has a responsibility to their audience, in particular the people that they do not know in their audience. They have a responsibility there that the audience members just don't have. It's part of why, I always get, confused when people are I'm sorry for missing stream, and it's well, you don't have a responsibility to be here. I have a responsibility to be here, right? But you don't have a responsibility to be here. You're living your best life. Do whatever you want, right? And I'm happy to be here when you come back, or don't, depending on how you're feeling, right? And I think that because there is a cultivation. oh boy. Quibble over which part? The fact that I don't consider it to be parasocial particularly because it isn't social? Because I don't think that most people truly think of their deity in the way that they think of their deity. Some people do, and you can tell. But people who do, I'm going to say that people who actually believe the things that everyone claims they believe within a religion, not everybody, but that most people within a religion agree upon, people who actually believe the canon act like maniacs. They are treated as being particularly weird. That is a thing that is true for every religion on earth. Is people who are true believers are very unusual, and that everyone has a degree of well, technically the rules are this, but
Back for another
meh.
lesson?
Technically this is canon, but meh. Okay, we don't have master, maybe? Let's see. People like to think of their deity as watching them in very specific moments. They don't like to think of it when they are in a casual moment. It's not when you're hanging out with your friends, you're not including God. That's just not how people are interacting. And that's true for basically everybody. Very few people actively think about the fact that they, according to their own belief structure, have a God watching them at all times. They think about it when they want to use that as leverage against something, right? So, like, if you have a compulsion, right, you can use the idea that your deity is watching you as leverage against that compulsion to not do a thing that you don't want to do, but which you're compelled to do. That's a thing that you can do, 100%. I would 100% agree that there are times when people want their deity to be watching them, but nobody thinks of their deity as actually watching them at all times. Like, people don't treat it as casually as that implies, because it's very casual that your deity is watching you. There's nothing serious about it from the perspective of the deity, because they're watching everyone at all times, right? Like, that's a very, every waking moment, I'm, going about my day, doing the dishes, hanging out with friends, and I've got someone watching me the whole time. That is casual to them, right? Like, the surveillance of every moment is a thing that happens every moment according to their dogma, but is not a thing that they are acknowledging in every moment. In most moments, they do not think actively or passively that they are being watched. I don't think that most people behave that way. People behave that way in moments of strife, but not in casual moments. 100%. There's a character in Monstrous Regiment who does that, who is actively talking to their deity and is always including them as part of the conversation every time they're talking to everyone else, right? And it implies very distinct and specific things when someone's doing that. There are specific behaviors that you do. Like, it would be very rude to ignore... It's very rude to ignore a person who's in the room. And so there's a bunch of social etiquette that's implied. What were we on about? Before I got distracted thinking about Monsters Regiment. Something about parasociality. I think that I basically finished, right? Like, the basic idea of, like, principally someone who cultivates a parasocial relationship has responsibilities for that parasocial relationship. And that we already know and accept this in other contexts, I think, is something that doesn't really need further establishment or elaboration. I nailed it. I should be a video essayist. I should do it. I mean, technically, I am a video essayist. I've done video essays before, so technically, I'm a video essayist. Add that to the list of things that I've done. Massage therapist, video essayist, writer, narcissist. I don't think that anyone could accuse me of being a narcissist. I don't think that would stick. There's nothing to distract me from, because I already finished my point. At this point, we're just puttering around. There's not like a huge amount of commentary necessary for what we're doing right now. It's just blowing up Titans, you know? We're almost done with the Titan section. Once we finish this, we'll have some dragons to deal with. And once we've dealt with the that should have hit me. That should have hit me. We got so lucky there. I hit the wall and then just, like, didn't respond. It's fine. It's all good. Did I train? I was thinking about training and then I don't think I did. Let's go train. But yeah, once we finish up here, we're going to have Dragon Breath. So that's going to be a huge boost for us. Did I train? I came in here and talked to this person, but for some reason I didn't actually train with H-Bomb. And no, I'm just gonna keep rambling forever. Once I get on a topic, until I'm distracted by something else, I'll keep rambling. And I've already said everything that I needed to say like 10 times over, but I'm still gonna talk. I'm a yapper, you know. I'll just yap for days. Good luck stopping this yapper from yapping. I say as I then go totally silent as I'm just dodging projectiles. I think it would be very funny for someone to actually calculate how big of a difference, like how much I actually do interfere with my own ability to function by just going off on a random, like, ramble tangent for a billion years. Of like, okay, so normally arc dodges like 60%, like 60-80% of this style of projectile in this kind of scenario. As soon as Arc starts going off on a rant, that number drops to 20%. The average time to clear a pack increases by 150%. Because of all the reloads and wasted damage. And just faffing around that happens. I want those numbers, okay? I want those numbers. My one regret of not being a larger streamer is that there isn't a community of nerds who are just like taking down those kinds of notes. See, this is something that I find very impressive about like fan communities. I'm not a member of any fan communities really. I just can't handle fans. But like like if I like a person's work, I probably don't like the other people who like that person's work. As a general rule. In the same way that if I like an artist's work, I probably don't like the work that they like. The things that are useful art for them are not useful art for me. They're just not my thing. Anyway, but one thing that I really appreciate when I see like, you know, the ARG stuff and like the other things, like this glimpse into these fan communities that just have such a strong like history of all of the things that have ever happened, of what the streamer has done, and I just find that kind of delightful. I think that's just sort of a delightful thing. Yeah, the thing, bear in mind, I don't have anything against like fans conceptually. It's just that I'm a hermit. I don't like people. So a fan community is a community full of random people, and I don't like people.
Who wants some?
I'm incredibly antisocial. The concept of constant prayer is not a thing in Christianity. That's specifically like an evangelical Protestant thing, I guarantee you. And evangelical Protestants do not believe half of the stuff that they say they believe. Not like as a rule. Like that's like the whole personal, deeply personal relationship with Jesus stuff is an American Protestant thing, and it's not something that people actually act on. It's something they claim, but they don't actually act like it, right? That's just not something that I've spent enough time around Christians that they do not believe the things they say they believe, which is true of everyone who's religious, because there's just no way to actually believe all that stuff. Not meaning like, oh, it's so ridiculous that to believe it. It's that you can't actually keep up with the dogma, right? Like on a day-to-day level, you can't get through your life believing the things that you say you believe, because it's just too inconvenient. It's just too much work, right? But the corollary to that is sometimes people's followers are better than they are, right?
Nice shot.
Sex is a very religious experience. At least it is for Christians. Actually, it is for basically everyone. Sex being a form of prayer is not exactly a new concept. That's, I think, like the oldest trick in the book. That right there, that's the oldest trick in the book. But also the important thing to remember is that Luther was also a fanatic, because Luther is the one that they created a religion around. Luther isn't a random person. He's a psychopath, kind of by definition. Like, you don't get more religious than the guy the religion is named after, okay? Like, that's like a different level of, like, interactivity than random person whose parents told them when they were 3, okay, you're a Christian, and they said, okay. Which is the vast majority of people on the planet. But, yeah. But I do think that it's interesting, because, like, as I was saying about, like, how I don't, like, if an author gives me a recommendation for a book, I'm not gonna like it. I wish that I could like it, but generally speaking, I don't. It would be very convenient if I could look at the reading lists of all the authors that I enjoy and go, oh, great, here's a new author for me to enjoy, instead of going, ah, great, this is definitely not my thing, I don't care. But that's, you know, such is life. There's a very big desync between an artist and the people who like read them or watch them or whatever, and or listen to them in the case of like musicians, which is that the musician is making the thing that they don't see in the world. So the musician, the artist, whether they're a musician or whatever, right? Are which comment do you want deleted? But let's see here. I lost track. Moderator brain turned on, so I lost track of what I was saying. Oh, right. So when an artist is creating the thing that they think is missing in the world, and that's part of why, like, I am willing to make a differentiation between someone that I would legitimately consider an artist and someone who makes schlock. Someone who makes, like, garbage that's just like everything else that they read is, like, I mean, they're, on a technical sense, they're an artist, right? They've put in the effort. They are making a thing, right? I will acknowledge that. If the reason they're making the thing is not because they're trying to change what exists in the world, is not because they're like, I read this genre, and this piece is missing from this genre. This genre would be made better by having this in it. This thing. This thing being whatever it is that makes your thing unique. Someone who isn't making that active decision if they're writing genre fiction or something that's like derivative off of like existing tropes. If they're just writing to the tropes for the sake of writing to the tropes, I don't think that they're an artist in the same way that someone who loves a genre and because they love it, they hate it and need it to be better. Someone who is actively in communication with the art form. It's like the what are the there's a D&D race that can't actually talk. They can only quote. They can only like parrot something that has been specifically said in their presence. So they have to construct sentences out of the like manufactured, like the copied versions of everything around them, right? And I feel like if the purpose of the art is not to bring something new in the world, but is to bring something old into the world, to bring more of an old thing into the world, I don't know, man. I don't have the same kind of respect for that. I just don't. Like, you need to have issues with the thing that you're writing about. Otherwise, like, what's the point? And you don't need to be actively thinking about that, right? But you do need to be actively writing something new into it. There's like... There's an issue with, like... I feel like a lot of readers today are barely literate, if I'm being honest. Like, people are so trope-brained that, like, it interferes with their ability to, like, function on a really basic level. Right? Like, if you like, look at the commentary on, like, books and stuff, it's just, like, exclusively, like, oh, well, you know, this section is, like, this section is a prison arc, and because it's a prison arc, like, it's boring to me because I don't like prison arcs. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? What the hell are you talking about? Right? Well, love is a theme. It's not a musical style. Love has nothing to do with the topic at hand. If you're making music and you're trying to make it sound like the Beatles, and you don't have any problems with the way the Beatles sound, you think that the Beatles sound great and that you should just make more of the Beatles, then you're not an artist. I mean, you are on a technical level, but, like, realistically speaking, you're not the same kind of artist as a person who's like, the Beatles are great, here's the problem with the Beatles, I'm going to fix the problem with the Beatles and make the thing that needs to be made because the Beatles are wrong. And that doesn't mean the Beatles are wrong. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, like, oh, the original artist did make a mistake. The original artist didn't have to make a mistake. But your version of the thing, what you want out of the thing, can't be the same as what the original artist created. Like, on a fundamental level, I believe that is the case. If you want the thing that already exists, and you make something with the intent of there being more of it with no notes, what do you do? That's just copy, right? And it's fine to copy things. It's fine to make more of a thing that already exists, right? And I am very fond of this idea. Yes, give me more things that are basically just more Legend of Dragoon. give me more, stuff like that, right? Just like sample it, do this, that, the other thing. But there's a huge difference between the things that have the potential to be like meaningful art and the things that are made because there's just not enough of a thing in the world. There's a huge difference between those two. And the thing that separates those two is disgust. It's disgust with the form as it exists. I firmly believe this. It's the thing as it stands is not good enough. So there's obviously like multiple sides to this. You can make really engaging and important art without having any disgust for anything, because you're just like, oh, well, I'm going to make this entirely new thing out of whole cloth that really doesn't resemble anything that much. It has influences from various things, but is like, this is just a new thing. You don't need any disgust for that, right? You don't need to have any disgust to make good art that way, because, I shouldn't say good art, important art, right? You don't need to have any disgust for that, because disgust for what? You're not mirroring a thing. You're not showing a reflection of one thing. You're taking, the totality of your experience and combining it into something fundamentally novel. But to be if you're working within a genre, if you're working within, like as an example, like Stephen King doesn't write like anybody else, to my knowledge. He's not writing in a genre. He's just doing his own thing, and maybe people ascribe a genre to what he's doing, but he's just fully writing Stephen King novels. That's what he does, right? So when Stephen King writes a Stephen King novel, right, he's just kind of doing his thing. He's making, novel artwork. One could argue that if he makes enough of it, if he makes enough Stephen King works, or even if he just makes the one, he could just make pale imitations of the thing that he has already created. And some artists, you could make an argument, probably do that, where they make a thing and then they just make a bunch of pale imitations of that thing, which is like not novel generative art, right? I don't think that you can really make that argument with Stephen King. Stephen King's work is very like, there's some self-referential stuff there, but like it doesn't feel really that formulaic. Which, I mean, part of that is all the coke. It's like, it's hard to find a clear narrative and coherence when the author was not in a coherent state of mind at the time. But anyway, so but if someone like reads a Stephen King book and goes, oh, well, I should make a Stephen King book, right? I should do something in this style, because Stephen King's awesome and we need another Stephen King to exist so that there's just more Stephen King. It's just not, it's a different type of art, right? And it's a good type of art that should exist, to be clear. I'm not saying that it shouldn't exist. I'm just saying that it's not the same thing. There's like a very strong difference between these things. And I do think that like most people, when they interact with a medium, are very hostile to the idea that this medium is fundamentally broken and it can be fixed by just doing this. If we just do this thing, it'll fix the medium, it'll be great. people are hostile to that, even though that's where all art springs from. All art springs from fundamentally dissatisfaction with what currently exists. Whether that's because you're making something completely novel because it hasn't been made before, or whether you are making alterations to a form that already exists because the form is missing something. And the thing that it's missing is something that's personal to you, right? It's like, this is the art that you need to be made in the world. Like, the things that I want made, right, are not things that I want made because the genre is actually broken. The things that I want are not the things that I want because there's a problem with every person that only I can solve for everyone. It's that there's a problem with this that only I can solve for me. Right? This is not the art that I need to exist. Which is interesting because one of the issues with making like really strong art in the modern world that I think is actually a major issue, and part of why schlock is so common, is that it's actually very if my favorite author didn't exist, I might still be writing that. And that is simply a fact. That is a fact about our world. I might be doing more creative work if the people whose creative work I love the most weren't actively making new work. And the reason is because the thing that I think is missing, right, the thing that I think is missing from the world is partially kind of just like mitigated by the fact that a lot of it does. There's fewer holes in the world for me to plug up with my art because of that, right? So there's less impetus to do it. There's not no impetus because my favorite author does not make every piece of art that I think needs to exist by any stretch of the imagination. But they reduce the amount of like the difference between what needs to exist, as far as I'm concerned, and what does exist, right? And so one of the things that's kind of interesting about it is that I would imagine that that's probably true for a lot of people who would make truly novel work, is that they find a person who's making work that scratches enough of the creative itch that they have, of like, yes, I am enjoying this, this thing, and it's scratching the itch and not making the itch worse. Because the thing is that every time I encounter a piece of media that that I find disappointing, the urge to create grows. Every time I'm disappointed in media, the urge to create something new grows. And every time I'm satisfied. You're satiated, right? By having had a thing that's like, yes, this is a thing that should exist and should exist in the form that it exists. This is correct. Every time you run into something that's correct, it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I don't need to make anything because this correct thing exists within the world. It's a weird dynamic. I think it's part of the reason why, like, a disproportionate amount of art is made by people from marginalized communities. Actually, both in the sense of like, there's always something that they can use as a justification for creating the art, which is that there's just not enough representation. Like, them wanting to see the like more character perspectives fundamentally gives that drive that doesn't exist if you feel represented necessarily. Like, if you're not going to be satisfied with the state of a genre if like you feel like if you're talking about like a modern genre, right? Like a thing that takes place, like let's say like romance novels or whatever, right? If every romance novel has a protagonist that is fundamentally unlike you, eventually you're going to want to write one that matches you better. And that's true for marginalized groups of all sorts. Anybody who has a difficult time getting published is going to have like that dynamic continuously. And I think that that's a good strain to have. It's not for a good reason, right? Obviously, it's not good to have that drive because of institutional racism, right? It would be preferable to not have the institutional racism than to have, you know, a group of people that are primed to make more interesting art. I don't think more art is more valuable than human happiness, to be clear. But the like one of the things that I do that I would consider at least somewhat artistic is anytime I'm dealing with a narrative that really just falls on its face at the end because they were juggling too many balls. There's just too many scripts and things like that. One of the issues that I have is that I can always see like the script. Not always. I can often see where the script veered into using a different script, like where like the narrative got changed after they had already started the work, and so these scenes are not from the same movie, the same game, the same whatever as the scenes that preceded them. I can generally tell when stuff like that happens. And if I can't tell, I'm more likely to get a false positive than a false negative. I'm more likely to have more respect for the authors and go, the reason that there's this desync here is because of a script change. Was that the thing that I saw? Like a like YouTube short or something that was saying that Chris Rock got kicked off of Jimmy Kimmel or something. Is that what the argument was? Because that would be crazy if that was the argument that got him kicked off. But it doesn't surprise me to hear that from Chris Rock, because Chris Rock is like an asshole, right? Like, everyone's like kind of aware of this, that like Chris Rock is and has always been an asshole. Like, of course he wouldn't want to stop school bullies. He's an asshole. He doesn't believe in people's happiness. Have you heard the man talk? I don't think that he has an ideological opposition to human suffering, is what I'm saying. And that's not even to say that he's a bad person. I just don't think that I think that he's an asshole, right? And I think there's a distinction between being an asshole and being a bad person. There's certainly overlap.
Okay.
Right? There's certainly a correlation there, but the okay, so probably not then. I don't know what he was arguing with Jimmy Kimmel about. I guess I didn't click on the video, I just saw the title. Like, YouTube recommended it to me. I'm like, I haven't heard from Chris Rock in a billion years. I really do not care. I also don't care what's going on with Jimmy Kimmel. Neither side of this engagement is one that is of interest to me. But yeah, the thing is that a lot of people think that art demands suffering, and I don't think that that's true. Art demands friction. There has to be friction. I could see an argument that art demands discomfort, but discomfort and suffering are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. Stress, tension, a dissatisfaction with what exists, these are all important. But you don't need to, like, do any specific bad things to a person to generate that effect. The other thing to bear in mind is that Chris Rock is almost certainly not being serious when he says that. He's an asshole, and he says things for the purpose of being an asshole. Like, he's not, like... I would guarantee you he's not serious. He does not care. That's another important thing to bear in mind, is that I find it extremely unlikely that he's actually emotionally invested in this stance. He might have a attachment to the idea that, like, you need suffering to create art, but also, like, the kind of art that he creates is fundamentally the art of an asshole. Like, his art maybe can't be made without a deep sense of personal, grievance, right? That's entirely possible. But that's not true for everyone. Not everyone's motivated by that. And it's possible that if he didn't have that deep-seated emotional grievance, he would make equally valid but different art that comes from a different motivational structure. And there's no way that he or anyone else would know that, right? Like, to him, right, without, all the shitty stuff, like, he wouldn't create the thing that he created. It's like, yeah, you wouldn't. You'd create something else. You'd make a different thing, actually. It's not that you wouldn't make anything, you'd just make something different. Yeah, I do think that there's a very big difference between my position, which is there needs to be tension for art to be made. There has to be a dissatisfaction with the status quo on some fundamental level, right? Like, the things that exist are not sufficient. What is being presented is insufficient in some very core way, right? The world is not sufficient. But there's a big difference between the world is not enough and, like, oh, I didn't notice that the shot was coming up. The world is not enough and, like, the world is suffering. There's a huge gulf between those, and a person who's suffering can create art, right? But they don't need to suffer to create it. They do need to suffer to create the specific art that they're creating. Like, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the specific thing that they made was a direct consequence of the suffering that they have. But I don't think any individual piece of art needs to exist. Individual pieces of art, I don't think are that interesting. They're interesting as communication between the artist and the person, but, like, if, like... If Expedition 33 didn't exist, and there was a different game that existed instead, that was created, I'm not going to mourn the fact that Expedition 33 doesn't exist. Like, the theoretical loss of a specific piece of art that I enjoy to be replaced by a different piece of art that was informed from a different perspective. I'm not going to mourn that. Certainly not if it hurts the people involved in the creation, right? Like all of the like abuse that went on set with like I think it was Kubrick, who was just like a real monster. Like I was watching Behind the Bastards on it. Hopefully I got the noun right this time, but I'm pretty sure it was Kubrick. Like really like way worse than anyone realizes. Like every woman he worked with suffered greatly as a result of that, and completely unnecessarily. I'm sure there's probably plenty of people that are worse than Kubrick. This is an industry that has Weinstein in it. But the thing to like know about the sort of like old timey directors that were all assholes is that the reason their art is good is not because they were assholes. They were assholes to a large degree because of the lack of any social conventions that would stop them from being assholes at the time. And I think you might be able to make an argument that the average artist is probably, like the average artist in the way that I have been talking about artists, is probably more of an asshole in general than the average non-artist. Because, as I kind of established, every artist almost definitionally has a chip on their shoulder. They have a chip on their shoulder about something. And that's why they're creating art. Right? So, making art is difficult to do. It's not easy to make art. Especially not to make novel art. So artists, I think, I would say probably higher propensity to be assholes. But like a lot of it just comes down to like how fucking monstrous Hollywood is. Like most of these directors were working with women in a time where women were not allowed to have property and were not allowed to have like bank accounts of their own. Like, maybe they could own property, they couldn't have a bank account. Women getting bank accounts is really recent, y'all. That's, like, real fucking recent. So, if you're talking about, like, black and white filmmakers, these people lived in a world where women were property. They were still property at the time. So, like... that isn't to say, oh, well, it was just the times, they're not actually assholes. It's like, no, they were assholes. And they were able to get away with so much more because of the fact that women were completely powerless in a way that women are not as powerless today. There's a massive difference between what you can get away with. But yeah, I don't know anything about Kurosawa. But it also, like, wouldn't surprise me, because, like, when was Kurosawa making shit, right? Like, was Kurosawa a fascist? Because he probably was, right? Like, I would assume Kurosawa was a fascist, given the time period. Because Kurosawa is, like, black and white filmmaking era, right? So, unfortunate news about someone who was making their films in the 1930s in Japan. So there's this thing that happened. Yeah, like bad bad cultural norms and the evils of society are things that influence the way that people behave interpersonally. Like they simply do. If you live in a police state, it influences the way that you behave toward other people on an interpersonal level. If you live in a fascist society, it influences the way that you interact with people on an interpersonal level. If you live in a incredibly racist or misogynist society, it influences the way that you behave, right? And I don't think that not everyone who was in those societies was actively
I've noticed.
Hateful toward any of these groups. Like, if you think of the modern incel movement is way more hateful toward women than old-timey misogyny ever was. Old-timey misogyny did not hate women in the same way that the incel movement does. Misogyny was demeaning to women, right? But it wasn't hateful, not in the same way. It might be hateful towards specific types of women, right? But the hatred of women as a category of person is not a social phenomenon that can exist in the long term. It's a self-destructive thing, right? If you see Korean society just kind of imploding on itself because the bulk of men in the country are incels now, Korean society is falling apart. Because it's kind of hard to have a society where half the people in society explicitly hate the other half of society. That's not a manageable phenomenon. But the key with those kinds of things is that when someone is interpersonally as much of a monster to whether it's minorities or women or things like that in the old-timey era, when they're doing interpersonally hateful or cruel things, the fact that their society is misogynistic or racist or this, that, or the other impacts that. But it mostly impacts who they think is a valid target of their cruelty. It's who is a valid target of their abuse. Both in terms of just the strategic of I can get away with this, but also in terms of who they feel is intrinsically, morally undeserving of kindness. And the thing is that generally speaking, the idea that anyone is undeserving of kindness is a fundamentally destructive impulse. It is always going to create evil. It just is. You can absolutely loathe a person, and you can think the world, it would be better if this person was disempowered, and the only way to disempower them is to kill them, right? I have no tears shed for Saddam Hussein being killed, right? Saddam Hussein was a monster. But I don't wish for harm on people like that. I wish for them to be disempowered, and I wish for them to no longer have the ability to hurt people. And sometimes that's, sometimes there's only one way to do that, right? We don't have magic. We can't just, do things. No, I don't. Jail is harm. I don't want them jailed. I want them disempowered. How we get to disempowering them is a real, tangible thing. That's the real world, what we have to do. Emotionally, it is emotionally for me, jail, like capital punishment, any form of punishment, they are all a means to an end. They cannot be an end in themselves. No one deserves jail. Some people must be put in jail because otherwise greater harm will happen if you don't do that. But it's not because they deserve it, because they are just as capable of happiness as anyone else. They are just as morally relevant. They are just as morally important as everyone else. And taking the shortcut, taking the moral shortcut of, oh, well, this person deserves to be in prison, so I don't have to feel bad about the fact that they've been imprisoned, or this person was a monster, so they're dead, so I don't have to feel bad about the fact that they're dead or whatever because of this, that, or the other thing. Taking the moral shortcut to this is a type of person that fundamentally is undeserving of happiness cannot lead to good ends. That is a moral shortcut that you can't take. You just have to take the hit of, yeah, it sucks that there's no way to, that we don't have a solution that is not going to cause harm to this person, right? But prevents them from doing harm, right? We don't have that capacity. So, and it should feel bad. It needs to feel bad when you hurt people. That's the key. It needs to feel bad. It's not that you can't hurt people. You can say, okay, well, look, maybe we should have put a bullet in Napoleon's head the first time, right? Maybe we should have put Napoleon in, instead of imprisoning him in France, maybe we should have killed Napoleon, right? You can say that, and you have to feel bad about it. It's just that simple. You have to feel bad about it. If you don't feel bad about harming other people, then you're fundamentally not doing good, right? And it is a internal thing from a perspective of action. The action doesn't have to necessarily change.